Plenty good.
Prepare for it. All right. Session's being recorded. That's enough from Don Taylor. Time to hand you over to Bob Mosher from Apply Synergies, talking about workflow learning. Bob, over to you.
Thank you, Donald, dear friend. Great to be with you again, buddy. It's been years. We've been at this. So welcome, greetings from Charlotte, North Carolina. As I said earlier, it's about 7 a.m. here. Sun's coming up. It's going to be a rather steamy day for us here in the southeast of the United States. Wonderful to have so many of you here. I'm looking at the ticker on the right. Honored that you're taking the time to join me and so excited about the dialogue. And it is just that, friends. I'm going to give you my email toward the end. Of course, you'll get that from Donald and such. Slides, recording, the whole deal. I got 40 minutes-ish or so to go through my overview of this principle and this topic, but I'm thrilled to say that I will be in London next month, as well as Dublin. I saw someone from Dublin. I'm also going to be in Germany. I'm going to be in the Netherlands and somewhere else. I don't know where the other, some other place. And so if you want to catch up about this, I would love that. And I am going to do a much deeper dive into this in a workshop at the event there in London in October. So
And Bob's frozen, despite the fact I know he has extremely high quality connection. I'm going to leave it for the moment and just see if he comes back on.
Hello, hello. Am I back?
You're back, Bob.
Donald?
Yes,
Am
you're
I back?
You're back.
Hello?
Yes, you're back.
Okay, I'm going to leave my video off just to do band. And yeah, I had just checked before we started. I've got a direct line into this PC. So Don, if it's okay, I'm going to keep my video off, friends. If you don't mind, you saw me. You don't need to see me throughout. But I will.
That works, Bob. Drop the video. What's important is your lovely voice and your wonderful content. Carry on.
Thank you. So if you missed my ramblings about my being over there, I would love to see you all. So please, by all means, if we can follow up at the event, that'd be spectacular. But if not, email, other things works. Please let me know. So this topic we're getting into today, friends, this is my 40th year in education. This month, 40 years ago, I was a 21-year-old chap out of university, and I got into public education, as we call it here in the States. I walked into Warsaw Elementary School to teach 8-year-olds reading, writing, and arithmetic, as we say here. And boy, John, you couldn't have nailed it any better. It's been quite a journey, friends. I got into education because I was a lousy student. And I wanted to see if I could maybe make it a bit different for others. Candidly, that was sort of my goal. And then I find myself here today. And along that way, about 20 some odd years ago, I discovered this discipline on the screen. We're going to talk about today, workflow learning, 5 moments of need. Friends, changed my trajectory. It literally saved my career, to be honest. And so I'm very excited to begin the journey, begin the discussion. We only have 40 minutes or so this morning with questions at the end. So I'm only going to be able to go so deep, but I do want, if nothing else, have you feel grounded in some really important principles of the discipline. And then again, let's keep that dialogue going as we get into this deeper. So what are we about today? Why should you care? This is an important one to me because I think all too often in education, we hop around a lot. As my mom would say, we're a shiny penny industry, which means we get distracted a bit sometimes by technology, by methodology, by trends. I don't know if you guys on this call are old enough to remember something called Second Life, but holy cow, and so I think it's important that we understand why things like this are so important, and worth making a move. Next, we're going to talk about then what is it? What are we making? How do we make it? We're going to talk a little bit about design. Now, I want to be careful about part 3 here, friends. We have a 3 to 4 month workshop on this. It helps people do this who want to design it in depth. So clearly in 40 minutes, I only have so much time to get it started, but I do want to talk about the fact that, like the design many of us know and have relied on for years to make training, make other deliverables, there is equally as vetted and trusted a design approach to this. And then by all means, next steps and how we can keep going. So I'm going to pause for a second because of that glitch a moment ago. Has my audio held well? And we're doing okay?
Everything's holding up. You're good, Bob. Please carry on.
Brilliant. Perfect. Okay. And thank you guys, by the way, for the back channel there. Keep it coming. Love the chat. So let's get into this. Let's get you involved. I want to do a poll to start. I want you to put your learner hat on. I want you to take off your L&D trainer, designer, manager, whatever you are. And I'd love you to do in a moment, we're going to put a poll on the screen, and I want you to look at these 5 choices and think about your journey through learning, through becoming a performer. I want to be sure we pivot on that word. You see the question up there in purple. You see the poll down there on the left. Pick 2. When you've had to do the most challenging things in your life, when you've had to, master something all the way through to doing it well, what 2 things, you can pick 2. What 2 things got you home? What 2 things made you a really effective performer?
And Bob, I'd love to see people's further discussion about it, because once you've chosen those 2 things, you might have a story to tell. You might say, yeah, but actually, I think you're missing something out. Bob, what about this one here? You might have something further to add to it. Please do so. We've got that big box in the middle, poll 1 discussion optional. Please feel free to add your thoughts. It's great looking at the results coming, and I think they are stabilizing. Kevin May says, I've made so many mistakes. They're my greatest lessons. They're only lessons if you learn from them, though, Kevin. I think that's worth noting. I think we're close to finishing there. It looks to me, Bob, like we have a clear winner. Let's bring it up.
Yeah, and I think we as learning professionals need to understand the power of failure. We like to call it safe failure. We'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. But the reality is, friends, in the grind of life, when we're out there doing stuff, trial and error, and look at the polls. I mean, look at the poll. It's 83% of you chose trial and error in the workflow. 64%, a close second, chose that you were on the job, getting training and grinding away while working. Coaching, third. All right. Pretty. Look at that, David. I sold ILT for years when I learned on the job.
That is fun, isn't it?
It is. And you guys, I do this poll every time, honestly. I've done it for thousands of people. I've done it for over 6 years now. And if you want to look up at the slide in the top right, let's stay here in the discussion.
Okay.
Don, if you don't mind. Okay. But and obviously, I these slides were preloaded, right? Check this out, you guys. Look at the slide in the top left. 1, 2, 3. Look at your slide, friends.
It's almost like you knew what was going to happen, Bob.
It is, Donald, because how could it not? I mean, friends, seriously, how could it not? Right? And look at the votes for what we do. Look at the votes for what we do. And so at least what I used to do. How's that? I want to be careful of casting this on anybody here, friends. But here's the thing: as a advanced degree learning professional in the States, I knew nothing else but 1 in 4. I was a L&D professional. Frankly, I designed training in whatever modality the technology could support currently. In my old days when I started, there was no such thing as e-learning. The internet wasn't around. So it was classroom, right? And then it matured to digital-based stuff. But as my father was famous for saying, lipstick on a pig is still a pig. And so I think for too long, we've been fooled by modality. A change of modality alone begets a different outcome. And I don't know if that's necessarily true. I was steeped in training methodology and deliverables for the first 20 years of my career. But then I ran headlong into what you're showing on the screen today. And that was, I didn't journey with them to what we all know, and you voted, are way more effective ways to get to performance than I was supporting. So if we can go back, Donald, to the slides, please. Tremendous discussion. Keep it going. We got to get in a different business than this, right? This drives me crazy, right? These are different ways in which we teach. And I don't know if you've heard this quote before, but people used to march in my office and say the following words, and see if this sounds familiar at all. I'd like 5 days of training on blah, blah, blah. I want 60 learnings on leadership. I want 3 days of training on sales or IT or, right? All those things. And guys, we have to be seen differently if we're going to switch to this new world of instruction, right? So do me a favor in chat, would you? Look, do you see these 5 things here on the left? Do you see present, content, discuss? And these are what we call instructional treatments in a classroom, right? It's how we treat instruction. It's ways we approach it, right? And these there's probably nuances to, actually there are nuances to these 5 buckets, but they're really kind of 5 staples in any classroom. Do this for me in chat. Which of these 5 do you think learners feel is the most powerful? Which is their favorite? Look at the 5 things on the left. Which are their favorite, do you think? You just plop them in the chat there.
When you say favorite, Bob, can you just explain what exactly you mean?
The thing they prefer to do the most of.
Okay. Well, it looks like you got a very strong response in the chat.
Yeah. And by the way, you're correct. Overwhelmingly, I mean, like your vote before, by 3 to 1, 5 to 1, whatever.
Don't know if Bob's deliberately gone quiet or if he's just suffering from another glitch with his internet. We were discussing this when we did the check yesterday, and Bob assured me he had a copper wire going into his computer.
Am I back again?
You're back. Press
Donald,
on, Bob.
I don't really know what's going on. Let me just try one other thing. I have everything shut down that might be taking bandwidth up, but hopefully it'll remain. So look at this class, friends. 5-day. This is a real life example. This was a 5-day course that was actually a well over 30-year-old course in this company. Been around forever. Look what it had become. Look at this crazy thing. 1,000 slides. The instructor had to do 33 slides an hour or a slide every 1.8 minutes, or they could not finish the deck in 5 days. That's a horrific instruction. But by the way, it's not the instructor's fault. That's just really bad design. And as you can guess, friends, look at what happened to this class. 90% of this poor thing was present or discuss. And look at the 10%. Discuss, I sat through this thing multiple times. Discuss was typically, do you have any questions before I go on? And that was kind of it. Right. But look at the bottom. 5% showing, 5% practicing. Look, 0 review, 0 time to this. This is because, friends, this is the world we've cornered ourselves into. We've become the cover it department. Our training is where we cover stuff. Now, I don't want to oversimplify that. And I do not want to say in the same breath that we don't teach or that people don't learn stuff. I think that does happen, but we've become the dumping ground, friends, of all the stuff people have to know and do, and we become kind of a one-hit wonder, right? We've kind of become a one-hit wonder, and so a common thing I hear in my travels and all the work I do across the world, frankly, is, boy, we've become an order taker. I wish the organization would come into my office sooner and talk to me about, why they want training or if they need it at all, but you guys, here's the problem. They don't see us as that, if I may, strategic. That's a strategic ask. And my gosh, Donald, you know this. For years, we've heard the classic quote, we want a seat at the table.
Yep.
Why can't L&D get a seat at the table? Well, friends, as a dear friend of mine said, if you want to see at the table, you got to earn it. You have to be seen in a different light. And so what I want to talk about today is, by the way, I am not by any means saying training's bad or we should stop doing it. Absolutely not. But what I'm saying is we have got to be seen in a different way and be allowed to and facilitate, host a very different dialogue around performance, not training. And how about this? How about this word? I think we have to get away from the word learning. Guys, only because it has baggage. It's synonymous with training. When we talk about learning, friends, it's potato. I don't know if that translates over there, but they juxtapose the words, right? We have got to be open to a different a different dialogue, and that means we have to design things different. If we're going to have a different discussion, we then have to have different deliverables. And oh boy, this last one, I'll get into in much greater detail when I'm over there in October. If you're in a journey into the workflow, this is about workflow learning, right? If you're in a journey into the workflow, governance and maintenance of content, calming the madness that the world is all about today. Content, we are not short of content. Learners, performers are not short of resources. What they're frustrated and sick of is there's too many. They don't know how or where to find them. And they're often wrong, out of date. I mean, if you guys are old enough in this call to remember, we were really into something called content management or knowledge management 10-ish years ago. It was all the rage. And it kind of dropped to the wayside a bit. If you're going to get into workflow learning, content management as a discipline.
Bob's dropped off again. This is when we're moving from the idea of delivering content to the idea of helping people learn not just for the initial requirement, but then subsequently.
Right there?
Yeah, you're back. I was just saying, Bob, you're going to be talking here about how sometimes, delivering content works when you're training people at the beginning, but it's only one part of a series of steps of when people need to learn.
Perfect. Thank you. And I, by the way, Donald, I continue to hear you. I have no idea why I keep dropping off. Sorry about that. But yeah, and I love the dialogue in the chat. You're absolutely right, friends. We somewhere along the line, we got in the content business, or we're seen as content, deliverers or communicators. And we got out of we were taken out of the context business. Content without context is meaningless, absolutely useless. It's knowledge for knowledge's sake. And I know those are strong words, but our learners post-COVID or wherever we are in this world right now are overwhelmed with data, information, and there's no lack of that. When I get into training, that's why we did, because there was a lack of information. There was a lack of expertise. There was a lack of instruction. Well, you guys, come on. The world we live in today, YouTube, my gosh, there's all kinds of ways that I can get to learning, or I can get to content. But the problem now is we live in a world of abundance, not scarcity, when it comes to this stuff. And learners are hurting getting out of this world of training and mastery. And we've got to get out of these words of our vocabulary. Boy, and again, I hope this doesn't alienate anybody on the call. But the reason I show these, you guys, is because we've asked people how they think of us. What are we synonymous with? And look at these words. They develop workshops. They do our curriculum. They look at all these words. They manage the LMS. They help us design courses. They have this cool thing called blended learning. Guys, this by the way, none of these words have anything to do with performance, because the learner can't survive on mastery alone. They struggle with transferring and becoming competent. We're in the competence business, folks. We're not in the training business. We're not in the mastery business. But for too long in my career, I had nothing to do with this part. Nothing to do, honestly. Now, did I impact it? I hope. Did I give them a good book or a good course or an e-learning ID and a password and then say, good luck? I didn't abandon them per se, but I really didn't live in the world of transfer, and I had nothing to do with sustain. Really. I really struggled with this whole idea of helping them with a sustainment strategy, not a mastery one. So here's what I want to do, you guys. I want to ask you a question. This world is the chart I was in 20 years ago, and it's a training first one. And I'm going to try to help you get better at and help, and frankly, help hopefully get buy-in that we have to get in the experiential learning business. But by the way, experiential learning doesn't happen in training. Experiential learning, like you all voted on when I started, happens in the workflow. It happens when you're out transferring and sustaining. That's where experiential learning is at its best. So, ta-da, performance support, workflow learning, this blue bar. That's what we have to get in the business of, and that's what my presentation is about. But I want to ask you a question. Oops, sorry. Look at this slide here, friends. This is what happens when you do this well. Let me go back. See, this is a training first model. Note, look at the death spiral of, I call it the death spiral of instruction. Look at that plummeting dark green thing in transfer, right? Because there's no stickiness. We're not journeying out into transfer and sustain and making it contextual in the real work. I know we tried to contextualize it in training with storytelling and metaphors and examples and analogies. But experiential learning happens out here in transfer and sustain. Look what happens when you do it well. Look what happens when you do it well. So do this for me, friends. Let's do it. Let's do a question, Donald. When you look at these two charts, and you have a new chat there on the left. See the new chat there on the left? How do
Bob's dropped off again, so he can hear me speaking, I'm sure. Obviously, in that big box underneath, there are 3 differences between the chart on top and the chart underneath. What are they? One is, obviously, as Bob was saying, green mountain of instructional start, which then tails off, and then we try to pick up with other stuff that's experienced in the workplace.
Am I there yet?
Graph,
Am I back yet?
And now you're back.
Donald?
You're back. You're back, Bob.
Am I there?
Yes. I feel like Apollo 13 ground control. You're back.
Can you hear me, friend?
We have contact.
Hello?
I'm going to type it in, Bob.
Am I back?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. So what's going on between those two slides? What changes in them? Put that in the big chat on the left. And it's fine if they plop in the right. Thanks,
sure.
Keith. Transfer into formal learning in the workplace. No dip in knowledge in the lower
graph.
Yep.
No chart. Yeah.
Yep.
The energy put in, Uli says, is retained. So people put the effort in at the beginning, and it's worthwhile.
Yeah, I love that, Uli. Yep. It's
remembering and using it. Yeah, I like that.
It's an enablement model, right? So the energy you put in is enabling the chart to grow versus the exhaustion or the drop off. Look at you, high transfer and sustain. You sustain the engagement of the person. Yep. Mastery and competence happens at different times. I love that, Sarah. Because mastery and competence should happen throughout the journey, right? It shouldn't be an event or something I go to or I wait for, right? Love that. Transfer doesn't happen unless it's baked in from the start. Absolutely. We have to get, friends, in the enablement business, not the knowledge transfer business. Again, some strong statements, but again, it's all about how we view our work from the beginning. Smooth, not jagged. Deliberate, not episodic. Penny, love that. Perfect. Yeah, and Penny, if you speak to learners, they'll tell you that they often see training as disparate, as jagged. I love that word, as sort of like these random interventions, right? That they bounce in and out of it, but then they have to go back and somehow make it a smooth world, a smooth transition. Love that. Keith, brilliant. People in our industry focus on learning as an event when we should focus on learning as a process. And what I want to be sure we do with that, Keith, is that it's not our process, it's theirs. We are enabling their process of the workflow. And we have to understand it better, be a part of it, move our work into it. So Donald, if we can go back to my slides, I love that. Let me show you, friends. Yeah, number one, training on average is reduced by half. And if I can be very candid right now, this is going to be a challenge for us, you guys, in the coming year or months. We're in a very difficult economic time right now. And it's all over our news over here. The world is struggling. And we all know what's going to happen. Let's be completely transparent on this call. We all know what's going to happen. Our feet are going to be held to the fire for what we do and how much we cost and the expense of training. It happens every time. In the 40 years I've been in this, I've been in and out of a couple of recessions in my life. I've been in, obviously economic upturns and downturns is the nature of the world. And we all know that, unfortunately, all too often, training gets whacked. We get whacked when it comes to that time. We have to be as lean and mean and efficient. This isn't just an economic issue. It's also an effectiveness issue. And training on average drops by half, the footprint of training, because you just don't need to train everything anymore. Number two, time to competency also is reduced by half. And we have data, by the way, to back all of this up. We've seen it hundreds of times. I'm going to show you an example in just a moment of where this happened in an onboarding course. And then, of course, it's all about transfer and sustain, right? So, friends, ta-da, right? Workflow learning. And by the way, it needs a definition. I'm a big vocabulary guy. We throw terms around in our industry too often and don't define them well. My favorite was micro learning. Don't get me started on micro learning. By the way, not that I don't believe in micro learning, but if you put 10 learning professionals in a room, in separate rooms, and ask them to define micro learning, you're gonna get 10 different definitions. And again, I'm not bashing the discipline, friends. We as an industry have to align ourselves.
I'm guessing that what Bob is saying here is we have to align ourselves with the needs of the business rather than the delivery of content. And I agree with Penny. Poor Bob, hashtag. I never had this before. Not quite sure what happened, what is happening with Bob. Bob, as soon as you do come back, we'll let you know on the presenter chat.
Are you there? Am I back?
Yes, you're back.
Boy, and you guys, thank you for the empathy, by the way, in chat. I have no idea. I'm doing my best as we go back and forth. But Donald, you're right. It's all about aligning with the business. And notice, so there's a couple things. First of all, we need a definition, but secondly, we need a deliverable. We need a deliverable, friends. And it's not another version of training. It's not VILT versus ILT. It's not e-learning. You guys, and again, I want to be careful here. And I apologize for my tone because I sound almost sarcastic in those words. And I don't mean to, but what I get frustrated with as a 40-year learning professional is that we have to understand that just changing a modality doesn't change the outcome always. And we've got to get into, and this, by the way, is an age-old tool, performance support, been around forever. We'll talk more about it in a moment. EPSS, electronic performance support. We call them digital coaches. We'll talk about why in a moment.
Bob, you haven't moved on, or the slides haven't moved.
I hadn't moved them.
Okay, fine. Sorry, I thought you were moving on. Okay, carry on.
So the deliverable, friends, look at this greenish dot. I would argue, this is you guys can push back, but I think we poorly defined blended learning when we first came out with it. I don't think blended learning was blended learning to a learner. I think it was blended training. We took training assets and we blended them, i.e., if this sounds familiar, a 5-day course became 2. And we added e-learning on either end of it and maybe some coaching or homework, or we flipped class. And guys, again, those are all fine. But the point is, I don't think that's blended learning. Blended learning to a learner is blending this journey, train, transfer, sustain, with different deliverables that meet them in each parts of the journey. So when I build it, we build 2 deliverables, a digital coach, see it there, and something we call targeted training. We'll talk about that in detail when I'm there in October, right? But here's the thing. This is a digital coach. I don't have time today to do an example, but I'm going to give you resources in a moment where you can go and see one. This don't you dare go back to Clippy if you're old enough to remember Clippy, or Robo Help. I'm going way back in my life here, friends. The early EPSSs, they were wonderful, but they're not today's EPSSs. Today's EPSSs are spectacular, and they cover the full range of instruction, meaning soft skills, IT, and this is just an example of one on the screen. But what I want to show you in this example on the screen is look at the diagram, friends. Look at the diagram. That is what's called a workflow map. We have to pivot on the workflow. We have to pivot on the work people do. We have to first understand, to Donald's point earlier, what is the context of the work, right? So a digital coach, here's the ticket, friends. The digital coach is now what I build first. I completely flipped my deliverable approach than I did 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I built a course first. I built an outline first. I got SMEs in a room, and we were already saying the words course, curriculum, chapter, lesson. We were using those words during the analysis. We hadn't put pen to paper yet. And we were already predisposed to training first, right? What we have to get out of is only meeting, those of you who know the 5 moments, these 2 needs first. This was the order of operation, right? Yeah, Clippy. Yeah, we were in the new and more business. And I will admit, 20 years ago, I was not in the apply, change, or solve business. I did formal instruction, whatever the modality was. I don't care how it changed or how techy it got. In the end, if you look at the deliverable for the needs it met, it was training. I'm today in this business, right? And although this is how we order it when we teach this, this is really how they'll learn.
Bob's dropped off again, but I think we can pick up and work out what he's saying here, which is that the sequence of delivery of content, or indeed of interventions, doesn't match the learner or the user's appreciation of what needs to happen. Exactly. Bob, you're back. I was just trying to say that.
Oh my gosh, I even have a hashtag now. Poor Bob. Wow. You people are wonderful. Yeah, I'm doing my best back. Bob's back. Wow, I have another hashtag.
2 hashtags.
Yeah, and so you guys, as Donald was saying, and I have been hearing, is that, friends, here's the reality. We have to start delivering for apply first. We have to build for apply first. I used to build for new and more first. Simply, I built for new, because people came in my office and said, train people up on sales, train people up on Excel, train people up on leadership. Well, when they say train people up, you guys, or make me a course, we're thinking new and more first. I don't do that anymore. I build for apply first. I build a digital coach first. And Kevin, you are spot on. Convincing them and doing otherwise is massive. But oh my gosh, let me list McKinsey, Accenture, Disney, Boeing, KLM, Dutch Police, U.S. Navy. These are some massive, Facebook. Do these organizations sound familiar? These are Bank of America. These are global organizations that have made this switch. Massive organizations, hundreds of thousands of employees. But friends, it's a mountain you got to climb one step at a time. And so the slides I'm showing you are the ones I use in beginning that change, Kevin. You're spot on, friends. But you have to have conviction. You have to know what's right? And because how can we vote the way we did in the second slide of my presentation and go? I remember watching this for the first time when I saw this done by my colleague, Dr. Conrad Gottfredson. He's the 5 Moments of Need guy. He's been doing it for 50 years. 50 years. When I watched him do his first analysis of this, which I'll talk about in a moment, it was, I'll never forget the day. I wanted to leave the room. I was squirming all over the place because all I could think of was, how can I see this and go back? How can I know about this and go back? Right? So I don't mean to make the journey sound simple, because it is a mountain to climb, but it's one we can and should do because, friends, there are ways to do it. So do this for me. Donald, would you go to a question real quick? Would you, in this question area, a new chat should appear on your screen on the left. Where do you think you are on this journey? If you look at your deliverables, when you think, and I mean the needs that they met. Could you over in chat give me a 1, 2, or 3, or some verbiage? Are you mostly 1 and 2? Are you moving into, which is the evolutionary side of this journey, or are you all in number 3? Yeah, and Penny, I get it. I totally get it. But the irony is, Penny, that's what they're allowing you to do right now. But that's what the exciting thing about this journey is, that's not what they want, and we have to help them understand that we get why they're making us do number 1. We get it, but there is a better mousetrap here, and we can talk about that. We can show them that. James, good for you. But yeah, you're going to get pushback, friends. It's reflexive. You know, when it's funny, when companies bring my organization in to do this, they've seen the slides, they've seen the deck, they're all in. But once we start tinkering with training, they start squirming. They get all anxious and excited and nervous or angry. Guys, I've seen it all in 20 years. But we can. But here's the thing: you got to stay with it, but you also got to make something. You got to make something, and do it, Kevin. I love that. Already thinking about running that poll. I do that, Kevin, all the time, because they all vote the same as you did. So then the question becomes.
I'm going to guess that Bob's point after this was the question then becomes, all right, well, how do we actually persuade people to move? But I may be wrong. Bob, I'm trying to pick up on what you're saying. And your new hashtag is Come Back Bob. Not always forgiven, but we're desperate to hear what you're saying next. I'm going to just suggest that he's going to...
Are you there? Am I back?
Carry on.
Okay, so friends, let's get back to let's get into the creating and designing part. So Donald, if we can hop back to the slides. So what are we creating? Look at this definition, you guys. How cool is this? By the way, Gloria Geary said this in 1991 in her groundbreaking book, Electronic Performance Support Systems, which all of you are going to run off and read. And by the way, great guys, great sidebar. Love Kathy's work. Very much in alignment with her in this, right? But let's get down. Let's just kind of stay here because I know we've been lagging a bit because of my audio, because this can kind of be done over here in the chat on the right, if people don't mind. Put words in there that make sense to you, would you? In the chat on the right over here. When you read that paragraph, what jumps out at you is really powerful about Gloria's insight back in 1991? 91. Love it, Nigel, right? Aren't we in the high level of job performance business? Right? Thank you, Donald. Orchestrated, guidance and advice, job performance. And again, you guys, a lot of you have asked about, how you start convincing people. Show them Gloria's definition and say, look, would you want to, this is one of my favorite questions. Would you rather I build a course or build this? Build what's on this screen here, right? Everybody wants this. In fact, once they see it, they want more of it, right? But we have to create it and build it. So look at this. These are my favorite words. A lot of you nailed it. Orchestrated, on demand, integrated, high level job performance. Look at that last part. Look at the last part. Minimum support from other people. right? If for a while we all ran towards Teams and chats, and Gloria would argue that that's why are we going in that direction? How efficient is that? Doesn't every organization? And by the way, Gloria was an COO. She was an operations person, and she'd much rather have people doing their own jobs than bothering others. Not that we don't, I get collaborative learning, guys. I get all that, but that's our world. Ask a CFO or COO their opinion about collaborative learning, and they're going to tell you, I'd rather there was less of it. Not that it's not powerful and good. I'm not saying that, friends, but sometimes we're not aligned with the business in our thinking. I'll just say that. Right? So how do we build it? Orchestrate it. This, friends, is not the strategy of what Gloria meant. Look at this crazy slide. How insane is that? This is the world we've created since 1991. And by the way, it's not a complete list. It's not. There's more dots we could put here. Our what we thought Gloria meant was a lot of stuff. This is not orchestrated. This is chaos. And that's the world we've created. And it's the world our organizations have created. SharePoint alone is responsible for a lot of this. Right? Gloria would argue orchestrated means designed. It means structured. It means UI, user experience, all the words we love to throw around. But we shouldn't fool ourselves to think more dots means better performance. We're burying our learners in chaos, not design and instruction. So how do we design it? Here are some principles. And again, when I'm there in London in October, I'm going to go way deeper into all of these. We have to embed it in the workflow. The deliverable has to be embedded physically into the workflow. That's why technology works so well nowadays, because everyone's got it, including people out in repair trucks. They got cell phones. They've got mobile technology. It has to be contextual. It can't just be a bunch of stuff. It can't be everything I could ever need. We have to contextualize it, and we have to design it in a way that they only get enough to get back to work. This number 3, boy, that I'm going to talk a lot about that in October. That's the real design rub.
Okay, so Bob's going to be over in October, and I've already put it in the chat once. He's going to be at the Learning Technologies Autumn Forum in November at Excel. Now, it's a conference that has paid for tickets, but partly because we've had a problem here, partly because Bob's got such a great message.
Am I back?
You're back, Bob. Just hold on 1 second. I just want to say a point.
Am I back?
Because yeah, you're back, but just hold on 1 second. I'm saying that if you are.
Hello, am I here?
Yes, you're here, Bob. If you can hear me, I can hear you.
Can you tell me in chat? I think I'm here.
Yeah,
I don't hear you, Donald.
Back. You're back.
Okay. Yeah. So you guys, sorry, I'm going to keep going because I know I've dropped off a bit. And look at the 4th one. That's that trusted and curated thing. I want to keep pounding this and subtly keep throwing this in, because this is a brave new world. And again, I'm going to go way deeper into 3 and 4 when I'm there together. And by the way, in the resources I'm going to give you at the end, there's tons on this as well. So how do we design it? There are not going to be, friends, there are vetted, researched, substantiated methodologies out there that do this. How many of you have ever heard of ADDIE? ADDIE. Anyone ever heard of ADDIE? Right? Far too much. That's a great answer. But you guys, ADDIE was a defendable, substantiated, researched design model dating back to the 70s, 50s. It's arguable where it got its start. But the point is, we used it. Some use it today. right? Why? Because it's a design methodology that helps us make training. Well, there's also methodologies. If I may be so bold, Dr. Gottfredson, the 50-year guy, he created one called Enable. It's up in the title here, Enable. Because he knew as a learning theorist, friends, that we have to have a way to do this in a scalable, sustainable way, or we're guessing. And he'd probably argue we're being irresponsible in our design. So what's it about? Workflow analysis, got to start there. You have to know context. Critical skills analysis, that's how you design what's targeted versus what's not. Remember targeted training? Targeted training. How do you decide what to target? And by the way, don't ask your SMEs because they'll just tell you everything. No, how do you know what you target when you instruct, when you have a digital coach on the back end? Then you design a map. Then you design a learning and experience. Learning being targeted training, experience being workflow, performance plan, and you build it. Again, overview today, way more detailed coming. So, give you an example and then we'll wrap up. I want to get to questions. So here's, guys, I wanted to show you, this is happening. This is an example that happened a year ago. This won many awards here in the States as an example of this. This was a large major consulting firm. You may be able to guess which one it might have been. Think about the big ones, the global ones. They're in all the countries that you are all from. But look at this, you guys. Onboarding is bad. I hate to say that. In a lot of companies, onboarding is bad. I once had a senior person from a company say, we don't have an onboarding program, we have an offboarding program. Right? So here's their challenge. Look at this. It took 18 months for people to be competent. Remember train, transfer, sustain, mastery, competency, 18 months. They didn't stay past that time because they hated their jobs. And their excuse was, well, we're a global company, so it's hard to make our onboarding program consistent across countries. That's wrong. But this was the challenge. What they want to do, they wanted to make it shorter by 50%. They wanted to have the quality of work go up and have people in work faster. And they wanted people to see it as a job, as something to be proud of, not something they felt beaten down in doing. It was a high risk, high pressure job. Look where they got, guys, from this. Look what they did. They built a digital coach first. They designed targeted training. They understood the workflow of the jobs people went back to when they were.
Okay, I'm not familiar so much with the case study. So, Bob, I'm going to suggest that in the interest of covering the necessary ground, when you come back, as we all hope you do, when you come back, shall we move to the end of the story and the wrap up and take some Q&A? When you come back. There we are. Bob's talking. You're back now. You're back now. You're back.
Thank you, Donald. So, friends, let me wrap up with the story I started. Remember this terrible course? Remember this hideous course? This is the most extreme example that I've ever worked on. But we did all that stuff I talked about. We went for 5 moments analysis. We designed targeted training and digital coach, exact same content, exact same course. It went down to 2 days instead of 5. It went from 1,000 slides to 75. 1,000 slides to 75. But okay, that's terrific. But more importantly, remember this terrible thing? The course was terrible. People hated it. The instructors didn't like it. It went from 90% present, discuss to 30, and 70% of the good stuff that classes do brilliantly and that students want to do when they're in class. Because this was a teach to fish model, not a feed them one. Hopefully that made sense. Loved the back channel. Sorry about the technology. No idea what's happening. But there's a lot of other information of where you can go deeper, how you can reach me.
Bob, I'm going to put all that stuff over on the left-hand side here. I'm also going to drop in your other contact details and so on. Of course, the recording of this will be available you'll get an email about it tomorrow. And here's your contact details for Bob on the left-hand side here. And I would also recommend, I was going to say this earlier, I'd recommend coming to see Bob at the conference in London. Now, Bob's, it's a paid-for conference, but if you want to contact me directly, or no, we'll send you a mail after this. We'll send you a mail with a suggestion of how you can get access to the conference. I'm saying that because it might get complicated to answer all the emails. We'll send you a mail afterwards suggesting that you can get access to the conference for a guest pass rather than coming in. Because I think it's a great message, Bob, that needs to be heard. Right. Okay. We've got a lot of thanks coming through. There are no particular questions, but obviously I'd love to have any questions you've got for Bob. But Bob, I'm going to throw a question to you now. Mm-hmm. Where do you start? Right. You've got all this, and we saw with the reaction, I'm in 1 and 2, I'm moving to 3 and 5, whatever. A lot of people moving, but getting pushback. So what words of encouragement do you have? Where do you start to make this happen?
Great question. You guys, you have to build something. You can do my deck. I could speak to your people. You can, but until they see this, touch it, poke it, try it, they're not going to let you build it. So we call it a proof of concept. But, as a dear friend of mine, Frank Wynn, who's a senior learning leader at Amazon, when he was bringing his prior organization along in this journey and kept getting pushback, what he finally realized was, I'm fighting vocabulary here, not doing what I should do. And they were very, Donald, they were very vested in e-learning. They loved e-learning. Now, loved probably a strong word, but it's what they were used to and thought that his department did. So here's what he did, Donald. He said, look, I'll build you e-learning. It's just going to look different. Because honestly, Donald, he said it was amazing. And frankly, guys, digital coach it's e-learning, to be honest, right? It's a different flavor of digital stuff. And when he showed it to them, they were like, "Oh my gosh, this is very different." And he's like, "It's okay. This is what e-learning is like now in and Donald, they loved it. They didn't even miss a beat, wow. Right? And so sometimes I think the lesson learned is I think we ask permission too much rather than forgiveness, right? And we're the learning professionals. I want my doctor using the latest stuff on me, even if it might look foreign or scare me when I see it. But that's what I expect them to do. We have to be brave and courageous enough to build what we know is right. And because we're the learning professionals, they're not. And so, darn it, make something, even if it's tiny, even if it
may be there's a sort of bandwidth restriction on Bob, that the more passionate he gets, the more likely he is to check out. And I can absolutely say that Bob is passionate about this stuff, and I've known him for at least 20 years. I just remember a conference in Hamburg in 1999, I think it was, when we both attended. And his energy and his passion has not ceased from that day to this. But what I respect about Bob immensely is his ability to change over that period and to have seen and learned from what's working, not working, and to have got to this point now with the 5 moments of learning need. And that's why you're so worth listening to. You don't need to be more boring, Bob. You need to keep on with your passion.
Am I there?
You're here. Wrap up. You've got 1 minute to go.
Yeah, and Donald, I think I would end with that. You guys, it's been, one of our favorite expressions in learning is we're lifelong learners. We are, but you guys, in 40 years, I've also seen us be a bit risk averse. I've seen us be afraid to lead and earn a seat at the table, or darn it, just sit at the table. Just sit there and make them kick you out. Right. And so my lesson learned has been to feel more courageous and proud of, and because we do the hard work. I've done the research. I'll go toe to toe with anyone about this, you guys, because I've put in the hard work to understand it. So let's keep this going. Let's keep the conversation going. So apologize for the technology, but I'm so looking forward to the dialogue that follows.
And Kevin May's wrap up is, hey, don't worry about getting a seat at the table. If there is no seat, sit on the table.
That's awesome.
Which I love.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, folks. Thank you.
Right. Guys, I'm going to shut the room down. I'm just going to stay with Bob behind with Bob for a second. I'll make sure that we get a mail out to everybody suggesting about the session in London. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. And once again, Bob Mosher from Apply Synergies, thank you so much for sharing the depth of your experience and the breadth of it and what you've learned on the way, and being, I think, a role model for someone who does actually keep learning rather than ducking the issues. Thank you so much, Bob.
Thanks, Donald.
Don't go away, Bob. I'm just going to close the door.
Yep.
Invite everyone to go on to hold. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you in a couple of weeks' time for the next Learning Technologies webinar, I hope.